A beautiful winding creek runs through the back of my property, cutting its way through the land like it has for generations. My family has owned this place for decades, and that creek has always been part of it. A peaceful little stretch of nature that made the property feel like paradise. It wasn't just scenery. It was history. But everything changed when a brand new upscale housing development was built right next door. My quiet life didn't stay quiet for long. The Homeowners Association, the HOA, for that shiny new neighborhood was run by some of the most entitled people I had ever dealt with in my life. They looked at my creek not as something beautiful or important, but as a problem. They complained that it attracted bugs and pests. They said the sound of running water was too loud and disruptive to their peaceful evenings. Imagine that. People moving next to a natural creek and then complaining that it sounded like nature. I tried to be reasonable. I explained the ecological importance of the creek. I told them it was a major part of the natural drainage system for the entire area. I explained that it had been there long, before their luxury homes and designer mailboxes ever showed up. But they didn't care. They had already decided they knew better. Then one morning, I woke up to the sound of heavy machinery. I ran outside and felt my stomach drop. There was a full construction crew hired by the HOA pouring concrete directly into my creek. They were building a massive culvert, a giant concrete pipe, to redirect the water underground so they could basically pave over the natural flow. I was absolutely furious. This was private property. My land, my family's land. I showed them the property lines. I waved my deed right in their faces. I called the police. The foreman stood there on the phone with the HOA president, barely even looking at me. When he finally hung up, he just shrugged and said they had a permit for a drainage improvement project, and if I had a problem with it, I should take it up with the HOA. The police arrived, but they were no help. They called it a civil matter, a property dispute. They said unless there was some kind of direct threat, they couldn't step in. So I stood there feeling completely helpless as they buried my family's creek under an ugly gray slab of concrete. I contacted a lawyer that same day. We filed a lawsuit for trespassing, destruction of private property, and just about every other violation we could think of. But the HOA acted like it was nothing. They had deep pockets and an army of expensive attorneys who buried the case in endless paperwork, delays, and legal games. Their argument? They claimed my creek was a public nuisance, and that what they had done was actually community improvement. It was maddening. They had trespassed on my land, destroyed part of my property, and somehow they were trying to make me look like the villain. The legal battle dragged on for months. It drained my savings, my patience, and my peace of mind. Meanwhile, all the water that once flowed naturally through the creek was now being forced through their narrow, badly designed concrete pipe. But I'm a patient person, and I know my land. See, I had tried to warn them that the creek wasn't there just to look pretty. It was a primary drainage path for a massive watershed. Every year during rainy season, the creek would swell, overflow its natural banks, and spread excess water across a wide area of land, including parts of my property that were perfectly suited to absorb it. It was a natural floodplain. That concrete pipe they installed, it was a bottleneck, a very small bottleneck. I warned them. I warned their engineers. I warned their lawyers. I warned every homeowner who was willing to listen, but they were too arrogant to care. They believed their expensive modern engineering was smarter than nature itself. So I waited. I watched the seasons change while the lawsuit crawled forward at its usual slow and painful pace. And then rainy season arrived. At first, it was just a few light showers. Then it became a downpour. Then it became the kind of rain you remember for the rest of your life. For weeks, it poured harder than I had ever seen. The kind of storm that makes you feel tiny standing under the sky. And I watched. The creek, now a violent rushing torrent, slammed into the entrance of that concrete culvert like a freight train. The pipe was overwhelmed almost immediately. It was like trying to drain an entire swimming pool through a drinking straw. The water had nowhere to go, so it started backing up. At first, it pooled on my property exactly where I knew it would, but it didn't stop there. The water kept rising. Soon, it spilled over the concrete barrier they had built, and began flowing directly into their pristine million-dollar neighborhood. At first, it was just puddles on their perfect green lawns. Then the puddles became ponds. Then the ponds became lakes. That entire expensive development had been built in a shallow basin, land that had always functioned as a natural floodplain. The water, denied its ancient path through my creek, simply decided to reclaim its old territory. And it was something to see. Their flawless lawns vanished under feet of muddy brown water. The flood crept up driveways and swallowed luxury cars. It reached the foundations of their oversized homes. Their entire neighborhood, their pride and joy, was slowly turning into one giant swamp. The very drainage improvement they had illegally forced onto my land had become the tool of their own destruction. They had created a dam, and now their homes were sitting in the middle of a brand new lake. The panic phone calls started soon after. First the HOA president, then other residents. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk. They were desperate. They begged me to help. It was almost funny. What exactly did they expect me to do? Wave my hand and make the floodwater disappear? The same people who had laughed at me and ignored every warning were now pleading for my help. I calmly told them the flooding was, as they had once so elegantly explained to me, a community improvement issue. I suggested they speak with the expensive engineers who designed their precious culvert. The silence on the other end of the line was beautiful. The aftermath was devastating for them. The standing water sat there for weeks. Foundations cracked, walls warped. The ground became so soaked and unstable that several houses literally started sinking into the mud. The smell was awful. The entire development was declared a disaster zone. Damage estimates climbed into the millions. Many of the homes were declared structurally unsafe and had to be condemned completely. Their property values dropped to zero almost overnight. They didn't just lose landscaping. They lost everything. Suddenly, their lawyers became much easier to work with. My lawsuit, the one they had treated like an annoying inconvenience, became their number one priority. They offered me a settlement that was, to put it politely, extremely generous. It covered every legal fee, every repair, and the complete removal of every single piece of that concrete disaster from my land. But the best part of the settlement wasn't the money. The HOA was forced to issue a public apology, and they had to pay for a full team of environmental restoration specialists to return my creek to its original natural state. It took an entire year. But eventually, the creek was free again. Watching that water flow naturally along its old path, hearing that soft, familiar sound of the stream again, that felt better than any check ever could. Next door, the ruined, swampy remains of their once million-dollar homes stood like a permanent monument to arrogance. They tried to conquer nature. They tried to force it to obey them. But nature always wins in the end. They thought they were burying my creek. All they really did was dig their own graves. Never mess with Mother Nature. And definitely never mess with a landowner who understands exactly how powerful she is.